Well, welcome everyone. Can you hear me okay? Amit, can you hear me okay? Yeah, all right, thanks very much. Let's get some feedback. Right, welcome everyone. This is the London Ambulance Service meeting in public at the Board of Directors. Welcome to everyone. Any apologies for absence, Meg, please?
Just from Daniel and Barry, and Rommel's joining later.
Thanks very much indeed. Any declarations of interest? No. If we go to the minutes of the last meeting, please sing out if there's anything you want to raise. Page 1, page 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Any matters there? If not, do you agree that's a record of our last meeting? I see no outstanding actions from that meeting. And patient story, please.
Okay, so I'm going to just do a little summary of this because we just had a discussion about this in the a private part of the board meeting, and just for the benefit of anybody who's watching, the reason why we did that was because the complexity of the cases we were discussing meant that there were significant patient confidentiality issues. So we didn't feel able to do that in public session in the interests of those patients. But I'll just say something about kind of what we heard. We looked at the really important topic of mental health and providing mental health care, emergency mental health care for patients across London. And we heard the story of two particular patients. One was somebody who had very significant both mental and physical health needs, and was resisting treatment and had gone into their house, and how the emergency services had to work together to help that person in the best way that they possibly could. And it very, very complicated, very, very difficult for all of the individuals concerned to deal with that particular case. And it just highlights the importance of parity of esteem between physical and mental health services, and the importance of working together with other partners, and the importance of everybody in the performing their roles, and a mistake in one part of the system can have significant consequences for other partners. We also heard about a young person who unfortunately was having serious suicidal thoughts and had slipped out of the system and wasn't getting the support that they needed. And the work that our teams did to advocate for that patient and to get that patient the care that they needed, which were strongly appreciated by the family, the family of that person. So again, a very powerful case. And I think all of these two stories together highlighted the importance of system working, and how we all partners in the system, not just the ambulance service, but mental health trusts, other parts of the system, need to come together to look after these patients. And it was a pertinent discussion in the context of the recent proposals from the Metropolitan Police to make sure that they are focusing on their crucially important police work, which we all understand, and how have been increasingly pulled into the care of mental health patients. And we are considering how we respond to the police's concern around that, and working collaboratively with all our partners across London, the ICBs, the NHS London region, the mental health trusts, to try and resolve those problems together, which are we all understand. I think that the different perspectives of all those involved. The crucial thing is that we are able to implement these changes without any unintended consequences for patients, which nobody wants. So that is I think our summary of the patient story, Chair. I hope that satisfies.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed, Roger. There were two very powerful stories, I think reflected very well on the LAS staff working in very, very difficult conditions with some of our partners. And as you rightly say, it also flags concerns about the Right Care, Right Person programme and how we can work closely with our partners across London in light of the Metropolitan Police letter to the NHS and their intention to withdraw from response to various matters, which I think one can understand from their perspective, but the timescales involved and the shift of responsibilities to LAS and other NHS partners, without doubt, will present some challenges for all, and we're all working together with colleagues across London to ensure that we can look after our patients and our staff in what will be a very challenging period, without a doubt. Does anyone have any questions for Roger on that patient story or Right Care, Right Person? If not, thank you very much. Just move on for a quick update from me, because some of the things that I wanted to talk about are actually captured in the later updates that we've got. But I really wanted to start with a tribute to our staff for the response to that terrible tragedy in Wimbledon, where 2 children died and many others were injured. And our thoughts are with the families and friends of all of those involved. John Martin kept me apprised of developments as it unfolded. And I do want to thank everyone for their swift and professional response to a very challenging incident. And I was also reassured by the care and concern we had for our staff through our comprehensive debrief and our wellbeing support. There was a period last month when we had exceptionally high demand in the second week of June through the high weather and the so-called pollen bomb. And seeing the way that our teams across the whole of London responded to that challenge and got inroads into the outstanding calls very quickly was again very, very reassuring, and I want to thank everyone involved as far as that was concerned. And I've been out and about visiting, carried out visits to various EDs across London, and I've met chief execs from Lewisham and Greenwich and from Barking, Redbridge and Havering to talk through some of the challenges that they're facing right now. And I've also been visiting chairs of Croydon and Kingston Hospital, as well as the ICS chairs for South West London and South East. In addition to that, I've been visiting over to Wellington House to talk to the Chief Operating Officer for England plus his deputy, and also talking to NHS London officers over there, to Caroline Clark, Chris Strether and Paul Bennett. Part of this has been obviously to update them with how we are performing, but also to get their feedback about how they see us. And there's clearly a lot of thanks for the hard work that's been done, but without doubt a real focus on our performance, particularly around our response times. And that message comes through loud and clear from any visits over there. The visits with our acute partners has been, and to our ICS partners, is for me to understand where our performance features in their regimes, because quite clearly our performance to categories 1 and 2 in particular are very much dependent upon the handover times of hospitals. So I've been pleased to see the work that's been done to work with the ICSs to improve the handover times. We know that's not the only answer. The work that we're doing on Hear and Treat, See and Treat all plays a part in that, as well as our mental health cards and our community cards. So there's a lot that we're doing to reduce demand, whilst at the same time working with our partners to ensure that we can get our ambulance crews back out on the road as quickly as possible, not only to deal with those Cat 1s and 2s, but also our Cat 3s, when you think about how much distress there must be for people waiting for our attendance for Cat 3s, as well as the other 2 categories. But again, I want to thank everyone, I think, for some outstanding work since our last board meeting to deal with those particular challenges. Anyone got any questions for me on that? If not, thanks very much. And then we'll move on, please, to our CEO report.
Thank you. So Daniel is on annual leave until next week, but has submitted his report, which summarises all of the activities that have been going on and the business plan, which has been approved now and is being shared across the organisation. If anybody has any queries around that, then John or I or any of the any of the team will be able to pick up on different areas and answer them. It's I think, a comprehensive report of all the activity that's been going on.
Yeah, very good, very comprehensive report. Anyone got any questions on the CEO report? If not, we'll go on to the Deputy CEO report, please.
Good morning. Thank you, Andy. So, the Deputy Chief Exec report in features and the board members have had a separate link to the new integrated performance report. Our plan is to publish that publicly. We're in a transition phase, as we've explained at the previous boards, in terms of developing that. So our report refers to data that is in there, but obviously pulls out those figures within it. So just in terms of taking us through, Fenella will start with call answering mean and EOC transformation. Then I'll pick up the ambulance response times bit before Fenella goes back to integrated urgent care, and then I'll pick up resilience at the end. So I'll just hand over to Fenella to give us the highlight in terms of EOC.
Thank you. So there's a lot of work been going on in our emergency operations centre for our 999 call handling. As has already been mentioned by the chair, during May and June we saw some very challenging periods where our call demand was exceptionally high. We had one day which was associated with unseasonably warm weather and pollution and pollen, where we saw call volumes coming in which were equitable with some of our most busy days during the COVID pandemic. That being said, the improvement and transformation work that is being led by the Director of Emergency Operations Centre, Stuart Crichton, is really making good progress, and we are beginning to see the changes. We have seen significant recruitment of EOC staff. We've been working to understand how our rosters meet the demand that we see at different times, and working very much from holding workshops with our colleagues in that area to understand how we can make their working lives better, recognising that over the last year they have seen both a move to a new control room at Newham and also the implementation of a new CAD, neither of which we can expect to really make those changes without a period of embedding. Our call handling time has continued to reduce, and we're now seeing a mean which is below the 10 seconds on most days, which is very promising as we go into the summer. The other areas that we have been doing, which I'll touch on in my Chief Medical Officer report more, is around how we manage the volume coming in to ensure that patients are getting the right care in the right place. So this is around the category 2 segmentation work to be able to ensure that the sickest patients are receiving the ambulances as quickly as possible, and where patients have been initially triaged as being a higher priority but actually are already linked into community services or alternative pathways, we are able to refer them back and get advice around the best way to care for them. Shall I hand back, John, to you to do ambulance?
Yeah. Thanks for that. So picking up response times, noting that they're one of our performance measures, but not the only one, and the rest of the performance measures obviously in the integrated performance report and will feature in various directors' reports through the rest of this meeting. But in terms of response times, specifically, May and June were not. We see that in our reported data as good as they were back in April. We saw a deterioration, certainly our category 2 that I'll come to. Our category 1, if you look at the statistical process control chart or the SPC chart, is within the limits, and for June we achieved 8 minutes and 1 second against a national mean of 8 minutes and 41. So that means that life-threatening patients, those that are category 1, are remaining getting a good response within London. For category 2, the next group down, we achieved 45 minutes and 43 seconds for June, which is worse than the 40-minute position that we had back in May, and certainly than the figure we had in April, and it was against a mean of 36 minutes in England. I think Fenella's already touched on our reasoning for that. We've analysed that in depth. We had in the middle of the month this notion of a pollen bomb, And actually, when you look at the data, it didn't just affect the Monday where we saw nearly 8,000 calls. That's more than we've had on New Year's Eve in recent years. So it's not just about that single day. When you look at the data around it, there was 2 days in a run-up and 2 days afterwards that required. So you effectively take a week out where we had significantly higher volume and longer response times. In terms of our response to that, we moved our REAP level, so that's our resource escalation action plan level, to level 4. That's the highest we can. We did what we called a circuit breaker day, which essentially was all of our clinicians responding, and we changed some of our incentivization payments to increase the amount of overtime uptake. That means the second half of June, the response times significantly dropped, and I'm pleased to say for July to date, so we're 20 days in now, we're at 31 minutes and 25 seconds, which brings us actually slightly below our trajectory, which was 33 minutes for the month of July. So June in 2 halves when it comes to category 2. The next bit of the report you'll see is our increased focus on health inequalities. We've published for this month our borough level data for category 1 and category 2. You'll be able to note that there is variation between the boroughs across London, and as a board we're committed to understanding how we've got inequality in our response times and what that is linked to. Our analysis at the moment is there's a very strong correlation with what we call job cycle time. That's the amount of time we spend on each patient. The highest driver for that is hospital handover delays, but can also be determined by referrals into other parts of the healthcare system. So if we have to spend longer on scene with a patient getting through to another part of the health or social care system, that can do that. And what we see is the boroughs with the highest response times for category 2 certainly also have the longest job cycle times, and they are linked intimately really to the hospital handover delays within those areas. You'll see the hospital handover delays are within the report, as they usually are. Just to note that we, at this stage of the year, our planned trajectory with our partners was to have 121,000 minutes lost, and we're still running. You'll see this in table 4 at 323, so 3 times as many lost minutes in hospital handover delays. We do continue to work with them when we've introduced the new pilot in recent weeks. So I'll pause there, go back to Fenella for IUC.
Thank you. So the integrated urgent emergency care, so our 111 and our urgent care clinical assessment service, has continued to be busy, but we have not seen the increase in demand in the 111 the patients accessing 111 as we did in the 999 during those periods of very hot weather and the pollen bomb and pollution, as John's talked about. That being said, we're still seeing a large number of patients accessing urgent care advice through the 111, and slightly lower in June, but very high numbers again in May. The clinical consultations are about 70,000 per month, which is enabling patients to be able to be treated at that single point of access without needing to be referred on to alternative care or coming across for the ambulance service. We have been working collaboratively across London to ensure that wherever a patient accesses care, we are working together to make sure that they're able to get a rapid answering of the phone. And the important piece of work that's been going on is to align the clinical assessment services across the whole of London, so that we are providing the service that's required and not passing patients back to their GP where that is the right option for them. So a lot of work going on with our commissioners to be able to support that work. There is a national review of 111 services just being undertaken at the moment, and we've been linked into that through the national policy team as the largest provider of 111 services in London. So we expect that prior to winter there will be some opportunity for us to be able to work with them more closely again.
And then just the final part of the report covers resilience and specialist assets. We've already heard that we had one major incident in this reporting period. We also had one business continuity incident and one significant incident. So you'll see them highlighted on the 25th of June. We had a business continuity incident. That was the national outage of the 999 system and BT, and you'll see details of that. The 1st of July, we had a significant incident with 5 vehicles having a road traffic collision on the M4 in Hounslow, where we treated 8 patients. And on the 6th of July, Andy's already highlighted the major incident we declared in Wimbledon, where sadly 2 8-year-old children lost their lives and 16 patients were treated by us. There has since been another significant incident, but that will be reported in the next board report. Ongoing training as outlined in the report for both our specialist teams and our ongoing response to the Manchester Arena inquiries. I think that's the summary of our report, and we're collectively happy to take questions.
Thanks, John. Thank you, Fenella. Any questions at all from colleagues, please? Sheila, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, John and Fenella. Very comprehensive, and I really love the new integrated performance report. So I think that's going to be fabulous for us going forward. Just a couple of things from me. So first of all, I was really interested in this national review of 111, and I was wondering, is there any additional information that could be shared, and how do we make sure that we are front and center in terms of driving that national review? I don't know if there's a terms of reference or some outcome that we're expecting from it. So it'd be really good to hear a bit more about that. My second point was on the BT outage. I know that we say we were transferred onto a temporary fixed network. Are we back on the right network now? You know, has all that been resolved? And I appreciate that it's probably not something we're going to hear a lot about, given the sensitive nature of that critical national infrastructure, but I think it's important that we're assured that we're back on the right network now. And then thirdly, I read, I think it's in Damien's report around the very high attrition rates within EOC and 111. And I was just wondering how we connect that back to the performance and what else we can do in terms of being able to, you know, deal or mitigate that high attrition rates. I know it's about, you know, there's a number of multifaceted issues there that are being resolved and being worked through, especially in EOC with the work Stuart's doing. But I guess for us, it's going to be important that we have sufficient capacity, and if that means we need to overhire to mitigate that, I just wasn't clear on how that is being addressed.
Thank you, Sheila. Shall I start on the one side? So the national review is being launched during this month, is what we've been told. What so far our engagement has been that the policy team came and spent a day with our team, following the patient journey right the way through, looking at the governance, looking at the audit, talking with the clinical team and the management team. They've done similarly to many other 111 services, and from that, the scoping of the terms of reference and the plan will be being pulled together. And as soon as we have received it, either for comment or for it being the terms of reference, we will share that, but we've not seen it as yet. We've fed into it through the policy team, having spent some time, and areas that we thought would benefit from being considered, but we were one bit of a national journey that they went round. With regards to staffing, the EOC recruitment and retention is progressing well. There's been a lot of work with open days going on, which Damien's team have been supporting, as well as EOC colleagues, where interested people can come and spend some time talking about what it actually means to be a call handler in the nines, what the opportunities are, what the career progression is, how to approach the assessment and the application process. A visit round the EOC. So we've had those being held on Saturdays and have had really good uptake. The advantage of those is it's encouraging local people to come and see what we do and where we do it. We also know that the progression of many of the leavers from EOC is that they're moving into other roles within LAS. From the one side, I'll bring Damien in, but this is more difficult because we are aware that many more people are doing this on a short-term process. So they want to come and work for us for 3 months, 6 months. It's a transferable skill that they acquire by doing the NHS pathways. So they're not actually leaving the NHS, but they may be moving geographically to different areas or going into a different role that then they do some bank work with us. Damien, I don't know if you can add a little bit more onto that before John answers the other question.
Yes, no problem. In terms of the 9, Sheila, we've built in that attrition rate to finish the year 18 vacancies. There's obviously enormous opportunity to increase that establishment by reducing that retention rate. But just to say the capacity is built on there on it being a standalone as it is. And the transformation work you cited, we're hoping it will be there. The ones has a different model. They're quite comfortable working in flexible working, temporary solutions, but I wouldn't mislead the board. There's also an enormous amount of opportunity there, and they'll have their own transformation exploration in the coming months.
And in relation to the BT question, I've got a letter from BT that sequence all of the timings, which I'm happy to send you, Sheila. We're all back on the primary network by the end of the incident, but as you chair that committee, I'll send that on to you. To provide assurance that we did all go back onto the primary network.
Thanks very much. Anne, please.
Just wanted to ask about hospital handovers, because as you rightly say, John, in your report, I mean, it's clearly working through into the category 2 data. You can see that. And I guess the reality is when you look down the table of the percentage over 30 minutes, then, you know, it's the same areas that are struggling as last year. There might be small changes in percentages, but broadly that is the picture. And given that we're now in July, I'm wondering what are the plans to, because we're not making progress on this, I guess, would be my observation. So are there discussions about a step change in this? Because if the trend that we've got is not materially different as we go into winter, then we can expect to see those times become even longer. When you said yourself that they were the major cause of the length of job cycle times, I wondered what the discussions were about that, given that, you know, from September we would need to be in a much better position.
Yeah, so Fernando might want to comment as well. So essentially our hospital handover times, you can see them on our charts, are flat, so that there is limited improvement and common cause variation bouncing around. We noticed that certainly at the beginning of June, and then we started a process with our colleagues both in the region and with our commissioners and with our acute trusts around, well, what next? What should we do? We have already we launched it in January, code badge across the ICBs, the 45-minute process, and we moved to a position towards the end of June of implementing, how to phrase this, but a hard stop on the 45 minutes, which essentially means once we get to 45 minutes, our clinicians, if the patient's not been handed over by that point, they would leave, and we've got some contingency around that in terms of bed provision, trolley provision, what that would do. We're rolling that out sequentially across the sectors. So we started in the north and one in the south. That was towards the end of June. So I expect the July data, in fact, I know the July data already shows an improvement in hospital handover times. The question we're now working through is how sustainable this is. Our acute colleagues put an awful lot of effort into effectively stopping any patient going over 45 minutes in terms of a breach, and the question is, as we go into winter, whether that is sustainable across that period. It hasn't been consistent in all hospitals, but some of the ones that appear on that list have done extremely well at being able to change their processes, and in the last essentially 3 or 4 weeks. So we'll see that in the July data. Fernanda, if you want to comment as well.
No, so I think the really key thing is that the clinicians, both within the emergency departments and within the ambulance teams, were continuing to work together. It has it has worked well. As John said, it's around embedding this so that it becomes sustainable as we go into more pressurised times during the winter. The other thing that we need to evaluate and bring forward is that whilst without a doubt the industrial action has put significant, junior doctor industrial action has put significant pressure onto the hospitals and on patients who are awaiting elective and urgent care. What we have seen is the ability for navigation at the front door to have been smoother with more senior clinicians at that front door. So I think there is some learning, particularly for the trusts where there are a very large number of ambulances going on in, and they have co-located urgent treatment centres and same-day emergency care, how we can engage with them to be able to navigate those patients straight into those alternatives, which reduces the pressure immediately.
Thank you. Any further questions for John or Vanilla on the Deputy CEO's report? If not, thank you very much indeed. And we go on to the Patient Council, please, Roger.
And so good meeting of the our patient and public council. We had a update on the move towards team-based working from Peter Rhodes, our Deputy Director of Ambulance Operations, and the committee were really pleased to hear about the implementation of that policy, which is really kind of gathering pace now across the organisation as we move into the autumn. And the positive feedback that we're getting on that from staff is, I think, generally the case that is so, and they were wanted to keep the tabs on how that was going. We also had an important presentation from about our London Lifesavers programme to offer CPR training, and in particular to reach out to schools more effectively. The committee asked us to look at how we could increase the profile of London Lifesavers, make it clearer for people how they could learn about it and produce resources that would enable that. And we are looking at all of those questions and have a significant initiative in mind for the autumn period, subject to approval that would do that. And then finally, the committee, which has been in existence, I think, for a couple of years now, they are reviewing their own structures and how they work and how they operate and membership, etc. So it'd be interesting to hear the outcome of those deliberations, because obviously having a really effective Patients and Public Council is really important.
Thank you, Roger, and it's very welcome, isn't it, to see those reviews that you just mentioned. That's very helpful. Any questions at all for Roger on that? I can't see anything here at the moment. Okay, thanks very much indeed. Very grateful for that. We move on to Quality and Clinical Care, please. Director's report. John, please. I think you're first on.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. So I'll just pull a few highlights out from the report that you have in the pack. So first is that the CQC have got their new quality statements. I've mentioned them at previous board meetings. We continue to align our internal systems so we're able to meet that when they switch over to their new quality statements away from their key lines of inquiries. In terms of clinical education, we've established a new education group. Really important that we've done that, actually, because it's one of the Ofsted recommendations. So although we got good across the board for Ofsted, they said we should have this new group in place, and you can see some of what they've started to explore. Pleased to say 176 learners completed in April and May, so ongoing high provision within our education centres, and 136 staff completed their operational placement centres. That's the period of learning they do on the road after they've come out of the education centres. In terms of the quality account, the board will be aware that we published that as required by the guidance on the 30th of June, so it appears on our public website. We'll go through that formally at the annual general meeting in September, but is now there should members of the public want to read our quality account for last year. And we're working through the priorities that we set ourselves as a board through this year, and starting to make progress on them as we come to the end of quarter one. Section 4 of my report references the quality report. I'm going to leave that till later because Jackie Lindridge, as our Director of Quality, has a specific item and picks up the quality report there. In terms of safeguarding, noting the ongoing number of sexual safety allegations, so 23 already in Q1 of this year. We do believe that continues to be because of heightened awareness and our focus as an organisation on sexual safety of our staff and the inappropriateness which is driving the high number of allegations that are reported. Really pleased to say that 48% of our staff have already completed the Oliver McGowan training. We discussed that at a previous board meeting, new across the NHS, specifically focusing on learning disabilities and autism. So good to see that nearly half of our staff have already taken up that opportunity in the first 3 months of the year. In terms of section 6, that's our quality improvement and learning section. 1,252 incidents assessed during Q1 of the year. You'll note within the SPC charts that that's in normal limits, and we declared a number of incidents, 13 patient safety incidents declared nationally and 6 locally, and then a range of other learning methodologies that we're embracing that you'll see within the report. Ongoing focus on closing the incidents. That means that there are only 707 open. That's still a lot, way more than we want there to be, and continues to decrease, and a focus on duty of candour compliance, although we do achieve 100% for stage 2. Freedom to speak up, 41 concerns raised within Q1, primarily related to culture and process, and these are about staff interactions within the organisation rather than freedom to speak up concerns about patients. So our concerns are essentially about how we treat each other and our ongoing focus on that as an organisation. Section 8 then picks up health, safety and security. 43 riddles completed within the first quarter, 51% as per usual related to manual handling incidents. 180 physical assaults, which is high. Means there was 76 within June. If you look on the SPC for that, it is still within the limits, as we talked, but only just. So I think we need to keep an eye on physical assaults as an organisation. But related to that, we've now got 1,899 staff trained in body-worn cameras. It's live at 40 sites, with 20 to be rolled out towards the rest of the year. In relation to our emergency bed service and frequent callers, the bits to highlight, I think, are that 3,462 referrals in terms of safeguarding, but the increase, and this is picked up via the Quality Committee, in children, and we note that potential on the back of the pandemic, but an ongoing number of increased child safeguarding concerns being raised. And I think that is mirrored across the NHS and in our acute and social care providers as well. 710 identified frequent callers in June. So there's the summary. Happy to answer any questions.
Thanks very much, John. I just going back, the Cat2 segmentation pilot, you do mention it there. Anything else to add on that at all?
I'll probably leave that for Fenella's report, so I'm not duplicating, but yeah.
All right, well, let's leave it to Fenella to pick up. Okay. Any questions for John on that at all? If not, thanks very much. Over to Fenella, please.
Thank you. So I will take the report as presented, but I will highlight a few areas. So one of the key areas that we're working on at the moment is to be able to safely and with high quality refer patients into alternative pathways and reduce the unnecessary conveyance to emergency departments. That goes hand in hand with the work that we're doing with the hospitals around the hospital handover delays, and is very much a focus for us at the moment. So some of the things that we have developed over the last few months and are now embedding is the urgent community response. So we now have 8 teams running from the urgent community response teams, and since October when they started, they have seen over 4,500 patients, with a large proportion of those patients being able to be managed without conveyance to the emergency department. What we've also established is that for our elderly fallers, which are a very vulnerable group, that using the UCRs, that we are able to get to those patients more quickly than if we send a double crewed ambulance. Our mental health team, we've talked a lot around mental health, and Roger talked about it as part of the patient story that we've heard about, but actually working to ensure that they have equity of access to care is absolutely critical to their outcome, and also to us delivering high quality care right across the organisation. The areas that we are working very closely with the Metropolitan Police on is around the concern for welfare of the patient, patients who leave a healthcare setting before they've been formally discharged, transportation for patients who have either physical and a mental health need or just a mental health need, and patients who are detained under the Mental Health Act. And we're working and increasingly demonstrating the value of being able to send mental health experts through our mental health joint response car to those patients. The Category 2 segmentation pilot, everyone will remember that London Ambulance Service and West Midlands Ambulance Service were the first two to go live with this as the pilot adopters for the programme. This has now been rolled out nationally. What we have seen now is that of the calls that undergo clinical validation, so an enhanced clinical assessment when they come in as a Category 2 and meet the national criteria to be able to have further clinical assessment undertaken, 50% of those patients are able to be managed other than with a Category 2 ambulance dispatch. So we're beginning to see real progress being made on that. What is enhancing our ability to be able to do that and to get patients early in their urgent and emergency care journey into the right place is the senior decision makers. So supported by North Central and South East London, we have had senior clinicians, either primary care or emergency medicine consultants, working with us to be able to support our clinicians to make those referrals. This is being supported now across the whole of London, and we will be meeting with the other ICSs to bring them on board to be able to do it. It also provides really valuable information for the colleagues working from an ICS on the pathways that they would like to begin to develop with us as alternatives to the emergency department. Our health inequalities work has progressed a lot over the last 2 months, and we have, together with colleagues, been developing our health inequalities commitment of what we're going to do as our business plan for this year. This is looking at the 5 ICSs and what their commitment is, but also nationally with the Association of Ambulance Chief Executives. And we have now put together what our commitment will be, which includes being able to understand better the demographics of patients who are calling for 999, as well as some specific groups of patients, one of which is patients who present to us with maternity care needs. The maternity team have been working very hard across London to improve the care that we're providing for maternity patients. And in particular, the evolving team-based working out in our sectors is enabling them to have to do bespoke training for the group stations on maternity care, which are some of the highest risk and highest pressure patients that we attend in the community. Our infection control team have had 2 abstracts submitted and accepted for the Infection Prevention Society, which I think supports the excellent work they're continuing to do and to deliver as we move out of a post-COVID era. And really exciting is that we have recruited further advanced paramedics, urgent care and critical care. So we have now an increased number of urgent care paramedics who will be able to go out to patients who are likely not to require conveyance, but require input beyond that of a standard paramedic response, and the critical care paramedics who, as we bring new colleagues into the organisation with less experience, will be able to go out to provide mentorship and support on scene. The patient outcomes are as documented. I would just draw your attention on page 9 to the significant improvement that we get in return of spontaneous circulation when we are able to send a public access defibrillator to a patient who is in cardiac arrest, where we're now seeing over 50% of those patients getting their heart started again. And I would again urge anybody who is not signed up to be a London Lifesaver through Good Sam to do the online training through the Resuscitation Council of UK and get signed up. It really is proving to be life-saving. And finally, we have issued and shared 2 audits since the last report that I submitted. One on the use of dexamethasone, a steroid that's used for particularly children who have croup, which is an upper respiratory tract viral illness, and one on sepsis and the work that we're continuing to do to ensure that we're providing early good intervention for patients who present to us with signs and symptoms suggestive of sepsis. Happy to take any questions.
Thanks very much, Fenella. Any questions for Fenella on that report? If not, I'm very grateful. Thanks very much indeed. Mark, please, Quality Committee.
Thank you very much, Chair. So I'll take it as read. It was a meeting that Karim chaired, actually, because I was away diving. Thing I want to highlight, really, as you've all had a chance to read it, is the sexual health and sexual assaults work that John just commented on. That when we discussed that, we looked at the alignment of the processes across different committees so that we can investigate that and do it more successfully. Just wanted to highlight that that's being managed. Happy to answer any questions or get you into.
Any questions, colleagues, on that at all? If not, thank you both, Mark and Karim, for that. Welcome, Rommel. Right, we'll move on there to people and culture, please. Damien.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll be quick in summary. So our core focus continues to be on resourcing, given the citations of today's meeting in respect to activity and response times. Our resourcing KPIs in the main are performing well. The key highlights to share are our UK pipeline, which has 590 applicants at various stages of recruitment. That's supported by an additional 300 international staff who'll be joining us over the course of this financial year. Turnover in the main remains positive. It's on a downwards trend of just below 13%. However, that said, we have departments that require further interventions, and you can see those in the integrated performance report. They've been subject to a deep dive exploration at our people committee, which is what Sheila cited earlier in the meeting. So 9s went first and the 1s are planned for November. In terms of absence, we've continued to support our staff back to work in greater numbers. So our absence in May was at 5.8%, which is now the lowest in over 3 years. And now this trend is representing a significant improvement statistically in the integrated performance report. So is a huge thank you to our managers and staff there. Outside the KPIs, our wellbeing teams continue to look at proactive measures, including piloting, tackling fatigue and stress in our contact centres, as well as group understanding trauma sessions. So that started in resilience and special assets teams. And we've also started the work on immunisation gaps to make sure all our staff have all the right jabs and all up to date. So that work has also begun. Our OD teams have been busy working on the procurement of an EPDR and talent management tool, and that's now entering pilot stage. They've been customising our top 100 leaders programme to make sure they fit within our internal needs, as well as doing some departmental sessions on MBTI, etc. Their focus also has moved on to visuals, working with our communication teams to ensure that we share what actions we have taken in response to the feedback from our cultural programmes, staff survey and strategy development events, commonly known as You Said We Did. And we're just making sure that that feedback is clear to everybody, that we are listening and we are actioning. A significant thing to mention is we started the DBS subscription update service. So that has started the first phase. We will have 4,671 staff signed up that by the end of this financial year. And finally, the future work for the team will be making sure that our internal people strategy aligns with the national long-term workforce plan, which in the main we should be fine, but also we'll be taking stock on the cultural programme, setting out the future objectives and how these have been formulated, and that will be subject to probably some board discussions in the coming months. Thank you.
Well done, Damien. Thank you. Any questions for Damien, please? If not, then we'll go on to Anne, please, for the committee report.
Thank you, Andy. So just 3 things which we've touched on, but just to say people have read the report, so I'll just pull out these 3 things. So we had a discussion, as Damien says, about the the NHS workforce plan that was launched a couple of weeks ago. I mean, interestingly, ambulance services don't feature heavily in the plan. But, and there's a big but for us, a lot of what's described in the plan will increase other services reliance on paramedics, from A&Es to primary care. And so we had a discussion about what our response to that should be, because that's already happening to some degree. But if the plan is implemented as set out, then that will be a significant shift. And we wondered, first of all, do we need to start to talk about a regional response to this rather than an ICS response, so that the workforce planning numbers of particularly for paramedics, has an overview? And is there a way that almost providers within London could commission the LAS to provide them with these roles, as distinct from running a market? And so what we decided was that we would bring that back for a bit of deep dive, as Damien says, at our committee in September, to really think about what our response to that should be. We had the deep dive. Damien's mentioned that that's something we're doing at each meeting now, and particularly focusing in the suite we've had so far on workforce stability. So recognising we will have roles where inevitably, because of the nature of the role, there'll be high turnover rates, but can we increase the stability, i.e. the average length of time someone stays in role? Focus this meeting was EOC, as people have said. Turnover for EOC is 22%, so that's how it's different to others. And we talked about the various things that we're doing to address that, from increasing staff engagement to increasing the overall numbers, but also importantly, reducing the line manager to staff ratio, which I think will have a big impact. But probably the biggest thing that will have an impact is the work that we've talked about in terms of having career pathways, so that people, we work to understand that people will leave EOC. They're not going to stay there for the majority of people. The profile is very young. They're going to want to move on. And so we actively recruit people to a pathway, which may improve recruitment as well, of course, if people think they're coming to a career rather than a job. In the autumn, we'll also do a deep dive on 111, a similar thing. And just to alert board members, I mean, the turnover there is even higher. I mean, that's 38% in 12 months. And the last thing to flag was we had an update on the culture programme, and we had a conversation that in the context of the strategy now coming to its final draft, and the impact of industrial action, do we need a stock take really to have a sense of where are we on the delivery of the culture programme? What do we need to put more emphasis on? What do we need to perhaps add because of the structure? And we felt that there was a need to perhaps take stock as a committee about where we were, a recognition that a lot of the work that we wanted to do has been delayed because of industrial action. And that now, with the settlement and the launch of the strategy, it felt right to take stock, and we'll be doing that at our meeting in September. Happy to take any questions.
Well, yeah, thank you, Anne. And I noticed at the end of your report, it did talk about assurance not received on the development of the strategy. So we look forward to your deliberations on that to bring back to the board. Amit, please.
Thanks, Andy. And I think when you were just touching on the culture piece there and the deep dive or the review that the committee is going to do, I think you also said in your report that that's in advance of potentially the board doing a bit of a deep dive into culture as well, which I think, I think that sounds like a great idea, and B, just a reflection that there's quite a few different strands that have been going on or are ongoing, like the well-read review, the Freedom to Speak Up review, the ambulance culture review that Andy, I think you circulated some information around. I think if we as a board do a deep dive, it would be great from a scoping perspective. We could sort of pull some of those strands together and sort of look at RLAS in the context of all of these different reviews that have happened or are currently kicking off.
Yeah, that was exactly the conversation, Amit. A sense that a lot has happened since we launched the programme, and there are other things around, and there was some sense of maybe we've lost a bit of coherence around the programme because of industrial action and because of these other changes. And it was good for, first of all, the committee to look at it as the People and Culture Committee, but then to bring that back to a board development session. So that was exactly the conversation.
Right.
And we will be having some board development sessions with outside OD assistants at some stage in the near future. But picking up your point, Amit, one of the things coming out from the ACE chairs meeting was just how many different audits are going on at the moment. And the feedback from some of the chairs, quite rightly as well, we need actually some action because we've got no end of cultural audits, but we haven't yet seen, well, and what next coming from that. So that was quite a good intervention. Sheila, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, 2 points. And first of all, I just wanted to underline, because I think it's an excellent point you made around the National Workforce Plan and the risk for us around this potential marketplace for paramedics. I think it's really, really important. So I just wanted to underline it in terms of, I think it's a brilliant point you're making, and I think we need to stay really on top of that, because it could be quite a difficult situation we find ourselves in. And then the second point was, I was just linking back to your comments around the comment I made earlier about attrition. And I was just wondering on the ones in particular, linking back to this national review, whether there's a way for us to sort of, I think, Fenella, you mentioned that the terms of reference will be shared soon. Should we be inputting into that, in terms of nationally, what is the policy and what are the interventions we can make around retention, or indeed improving or reducing the turnover within the ones, and whether or not linking that to whether or not there is a part digital solution to that, where we could look at a different workforce profile by offering a combination of a digital response alongside a different workforce profile, alongside, of course, the advancements in generative AI, which I do think are going to be very influential in the one service. So I just think that review, we might want to just see if what is the scope of that review, and if it is a substantial review, how do we make sure we're influencing that appropriately?
I think that's a good idea, and perhaps with Fenella we can look at that. I mean, one point, not in terms of the AI, which I think is a really important point you make, Sheila. One point we did discuss in advance of our deep dive into 111 is the fact that obviously one of the pressures is that it's not only we're competing with private providers, so the pay landscape is completely different in terms of how we're able to manage the labour market compared to other parts of our workforce, and that is really impacting on us. So to what degree there can be any kind of national regulation of that, I'm not clear, but that is a significant issue. But the AI point, I think, is well made.
Thank you. Rommel, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just agreeing with the comments that have already been made, I just wanted to pull out in the face of the long-term workforce plan, not referencing paramedics specifically, to commend the good work I think that is going on. And I noticed the recent outtake of graduates who'd come out from the University of Cumbria. So I think, those sort of initiatives to create a pipeline of talent are great, even though it doesn't get mentioned in the long-term workforce plan. But and the fact that there's an education governance committee that's looking at the quality of learning. So indeed, we're sort of really looking after our people. So just to commend that as something that's really good work going on.
Yeah, thank you, Rommel. That's a very well made point. Any other questions on that at all? If not, thank you very much indeed for those reports. Now move on to finance, please. Rakesh, please.
Thank you, Chair. So We have on convening the board, the finance director report for the end of April, but and I'll take that as read, but I think maybe more relevant if I just give the board an update on where we are on those items, so close to the end of May and June. So we continue to deliver our income and expenditure plan in May, as we have done in April. So we posted a small surplus in May. We posted a surplus which was slightly ahead of plan, so we continue to do that. We continue with our capital program with a forecast just over £29.5 million forecast overspent. I have to say there are some pressures against that, and we're working on that as towards the end of the year. The report in convene talks about our rollout of fleet and our double crew ambulances. As we sit here now, we have 10 brand new double crew ambulances working in the Oval Group. They've been deployed to the Oval Group. We've now received 3 more that are going through familiarization training, and they'll be deployed to Edmonton, 10 of those. So we received them in batches of 10. So the second batch is now with us, and we will deploy those to the Edmonton route. And then we'll get a further 10 at the beginning of August. And they'll be, so we are now starting to roll these out following the familiarization training. Equally, and then continue on in the autumn and early winter, a further 88 will come. So this will increase our DCA. We'll have brand DCAs of above 130 odd new DCAs this year. Some will be, older ones will be rolled out because they're not ULEZ compliant. But the aim is to then increase our overall fleet size for DCAs by around 50, which is just under 10%. So I think that's really important given some of the issues we've talked about. Equally as important is we have a mixed fleet. Our first Volvos have arrived as well. So we ordered 55 Volvos. So the first one is now has now arrived, and is for our clinical team managers and our EPRR teams. So they'll be rolling out as well in batches of 10 as well. So we're now seeing a replacement plan coming to fruition for our fleet. On estates, the report talks about Bernard Weatherhouse, so we are continuing on that work. There are some challenges to that, but that work is ongoing. Equally as importantly, we have started to enact some of the smaller elements of our estate strategy. So we're currently working on creating a new base for our cycle response team at Smithville Ambulance Station and at Heathrow as well. So we're looking to expand and create more space for our cycle response unit there. And then lastly, not on the report, but I think it's important the board know it is one of our in the business plan is fixing the basic program. So the fixing the basic program has been developed to improve processes and essentially reduce time wasted by frontline staff. So the program was sort of instigated by having a survey where staff fed back to say what elements of their working day had the most negative impact. And based on that feedback and also local knowledge from managers and interviews, we've alighted on looking at 6 or 7 processes that, if we get right, will significantly improve the working life and make of our paramedics and frontline staff and make it more efficient. We are following a quality improvement approach. So someone in Jackie's team is part of the program team, and we've created a whole program structure. So we are now following a systematic QI approach, quality improvement approach. And in the early, so we've been about 5 weeks into the program following this systematic approach, and we've already got some early wins. So OP15 defibrillators was very high up on people's frustration list. So through a program of managers and central logistics team going to ambulance stations, we found We found a whole bunch of them, around 30 odd, and they're now they've been recycled as well. We have bought 80 new defibrillators as well, so they're now in the system as well. Some of them are in the system as well, and that really impact on out of service for vehicles. So that's happening. The other quick win that's happened is people were saying that we did not have enough make-ready hubs. So through consultations and discussions with operational staff, we're now creating 3 sub hubs for make-ready stuff, and that for make-ready. And what that will do is reduce vehicle movements early in the shift time. And so we've now created that as well. And the first one will be operational in Croydon in the next 2 weeks. So by the end of August, we'll have 3 operational new make-ready hubs. They're smaller than the big main ones, but it will make it more efficient, and we'll have a few vehicles moving around London as well. So the program has already identified a number of things that we're working on. And Executive Committee gets regular updates, the next one being this Wednesday. So I think that's quite an exciting thing that the team is working on. So I'll pause there and take questions, Chair.
Well, excellent, Rakesh. Thank you. There's so much going on, isn't there? But it's great to hear about those real practical things to help the front line. Well done. Thank you. Any questions for Rakesh at all, please, on his report? If not, we'll go on to you, Bob, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'll take the report as read. As you'll see, it sort of deals predominantly with ancient history, confirming the month 12 position that's now gone through audit, and looking at the early months of this financial year in revenue and capital, and recognising that there'd been, as Rakesh said, there'd been some early slippage in capital that is expected to recover. So we've got ourselves a bit out of kilter. Just to remind board members that we are continuing with the FIC Light process in the interregnum of formal board reports, and I think that helps us have a good view of financial issues in what we know is going to be a challenging year. Could I just tell the board, though, we have a formal FIC meeting tomorrow, and it's going to be quite a crucial one, I think. Firstly, it will allow us to look at Q1 results and tie that and do some tie-up between what's going on in activity performance and what's going on with the money in an actual sense, and I think that's quite key. It will also allow us to have a bit of a good conversation of the risks to financial delivery in 3-4 and the mitigations that the executive and officers are putting in place to obviate those. And I'd say that from a revenue and a capital perspective. It will also give us an opportunity to have a hard look at where we are with cost improvement identification, recognising completely that we met the number at month 2, but half of it was recurrent and half of it wasn't. And it would be quite interesting. And now we need to start seeing the traction going on in the organisation, and it'll give us an opportunity to identify where we want to go with deep dives later in the calendar year. And then finally, we will be having a review of a particular state-related business case dealing with the transfer of the 111 service to look at what that means, what the timing of it means, but what, if any, pressure that's going to put on revenue and capital positions in 3-4, and again, what mitigations can we identify and be assured by. So tomorrow is quite an important FIC, and it's a shame that we've sort of got it out of order in the context of the importance of bringing those messages back to the board. But I thought it was important that you know what we're going to be looking at tomorrow, even though I won't be reporting on the assurance of such until we meet again towards the end of the summer.
Thanks very much indeed, Bob. Any questions for Bob at all on that? If not, then thank you very much indeed, and we'll go on to audit. Rommel, please.
Thank you, Chair. I guess first 3 or 4 points to make. to draw from the report. This particular audit committee was very focused on the annual report and accounts, and I'm pleased to note that we signed off, but with some challenges. And the couple of points to draw out would be, I think our external auditors exhibited quite robust professional skepticism on provisioning in particular, which required quite a few pre-meetings to get to a consensus and an agreement on management's view on where we ended up. And of course, that's obviously been disclosed appropriately. On the plus side, I think the external auditors also noted no significant weaknesses on value for money. So I think in the context of what Bob just said, the challenge about continuing to deliver value for money is ever present. And I think, FIC's work in that regard is going to have to be very, very high on everybody's agenda, I think, as we go through the rest of the year. And the last point just to bring out, I guess, was the internal audit program secured an overall moderate assurance on our systems of internal control, and particularly required more of a focus on a key data quality audit, which reported no significant errors. So we had to go around a couple of times on that one. But to note that it came up with no significant areas, but nevertheless, I think the audit committee did ask for further work on a set of clinical indicators and a specific set of work on 111 IUC, which goes back to some historical issues, and noted actually the importance of Sheila's new data digital committee, which is going to keep a roving oversight on our data quality. So those would be the points I would draw out, but happy to take any questions.
Thanks very much indeed, Rommel. Any questions for anyone on Rommel's report at all, please? If not, I can't see any on there. Colleagues, I think we'll take a very short break. So if we come back at 12:20, please, 12:20, please, and we'll come back then. Thank you.
I think we were frozen. Can you see and hear us now? Okay, very good.
We're on public stream.
No, well, we're not broadcasting. I shouldn't try this. Teresa's not public.
But yes, you were frozen earlier.
We were still here.
I thought you'd all gone for a coffee break and we're just pretending.
No. Promise.
Not that it ever crossed my mind, of course.
It's a new screenshot, Mark. You know, you just put yourself up, your avatar, and you pretend you're working away and you're off doing something else fun.
But it was that was a photo. My background is a photo taken as the meeting started, so that was my first start of that.
I think we're all back now, so we'll make a start. Now, Mark, please.
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight a couple of points from my report, starting with complaints. I talk about how we've had a reduction in the number of complaints received from 223 to 161, comparing the same period between 2 years. It's quite interesting cross-referencing that with our new IPR, because according to the IPR, that is common cause variation and therefore not significant, which puts a kind of interesting light on it. I also talk about the increase in the number of complaints closed. And again, if you look at the SPR chart, you'll see that our response times have now got into the territory of special cause variation, which I take to mean that our intervention on addressing the backlog of complaints has actually been effective. So I just think it's interesting cross-referencing the figures in my report with the SPR charts. Second thing I wanted to mention was the DSPT, and you'll be aware that through the year we worry about it, and there's a whole series of assurance statements we have to complete, and in particular the point which probably in some respects is the most worrying is making sure 95% of the organisation have completed their information governance training. We did, I'm pleased to say, get over the line, in fact slightly past the line, because we got up to 97%. But I don't think we should underestimate the effort that's required getting the organisation to that level, both on the part of staff and on the part of the people who do the training and the chasing. But it's good news we've got the DSPT over the line. The final thing I wanted to mention, and it's a subject that's come up in previous board meetings, is where we are on policies. So we have been reporting a number of overdue policies. We set a target that 85% of our policies would be in date by the end of July, and there would be no long waiters. As of yesterday, our figure was 74% in date. I think we're going to slightly undershoot the 85% target, but what I'm reassured by is we now have dates for the policies which are out of date. We've got dates for their completion, and some of the committees they will go to are not scheduled till August. So I think we've got a pretty good grip on policies now. I also mention our new policy on policies, which comes up later in the agenda. I won't go through that now, but that is actually an important plank in making it easier for us to keep our policies up to date. Maybe we'll save that to the end of the meeting.
Thank you very much indeed, Mark. Any questions for Mark, please? If not, so well done for getting us over the line on the training. Yeah, I do appreciate just how hard that is and the disproportionate amount of effort it takes to make that happen. And no doubt we'll have similar challenges as the year unfolds, but anything we can do to assist on that, then please let us know. If there are no questions for Mark on that, we'll move on to data and digital. That's you, John, isn't it?
I think it's me, Chair, is it? Or John, do you want to kick off or do you want me to?
No, I was expecting you to, Sheena.
All right, let me do it then. Happy to do that. Yeah, so just to let the board know that we had our first meeting of the Data Quality and Digital Committee. It was a shorter meeting than going forward, and that was largely because we're really just still in startup mode for the committee, and there's also some really good work happening within the executive that will feed into the committee as we go forward. So just a couple of points. Apologies, there's no written update because we only met last Friday. So we agreed we'd do a verbal update, but the board will receive written updates in future. So a couple of points from me just to let you know the workings of the committee to date. So the first thing to say is that you will find in Convene the terms of reference for the committee. So we did review and make some amendments to the terms of reference. We had a good conversation about the terms of reference, making sure we were all comfortable with the scope and the workings and requirements of the committee. I think that was very healthy and a very good discussion. And we're submitting it here to the board for final approval. I'd also like to mention that in terms of attendees, we're very privileged to have the attendance of Dr. Arjun Dhillon. He is attending as an external member. He is currently, in addition to his role in primary care, he is also the Deputy National Chief Clinical Information Officer. So we think it's a really great addition to our subcommittee and will actually allow us to gain better alignment and integration across the wider system. So we're grateful to Arjun for joining us. So we will submit the terms of reference for your approval. We'll pick that up just at the end. In terms of other workings of the board, we did go through the C1 Verita action plan. We got an update on all of the actions, and we're pleased to note that there has been good progress. The expectation is that all actions will be completed by the end of August. So we had a discussion then around how we will take assurance on those actions, and we agreed that we would receive a more detailed assurance report, which would include evidence of the various activities that have been undertaken to discharge those actions. We would receive that at our next meeting, which will be in September. So we're looking forward to that report. We then heard from John Martin, who gave us a verbal update on the establishment of the Executive Data Quality Group, which will be a really important group that will feed into, first of all, reporting into the ExCo, but secondly, from an assurance purpose, will report up through the Digital and Data Quality Group. That group had its first meeting on the 12th of July. John is the chair of that group or that committee, and we are very much looking forward to receiving a regular report on the activities of the committee, particularly as they relate to the duties of the subcommittee that we are overseeing. So we will receive our first report again at our September meeting. We then received a verbal update on the development of the refreshed digital strategy, which is going to be very important in underpinning the Trust's overall strategy that we discussed earlier with Roger. So there has been substantial work on that refreshed digital strategy, and we were advised that the final version or near final version of that strategy will be presented to us in September. It needs to go through some further internal reviews and some further iterations before we receive the final version of that. So I'm sure that'll be something the board will be interested in reviewing in due course. Aligned to that, we asked a question as to whether or not there is going to be a data strategy And Roger very kindly agreed to follow up. And Roger and I are going to have a discussion offline just with respect to a data strategy, because we're very interested in understanding how the data strategy will underpin the trust overall trust strategy, but also the FY24 plan. And particularly with references to health inequalities and a lot of the work we're doing around surfacing the vast amount of data and information that we hold within the trust. So I believe there's quite a lot of work ongoing already. So Roger and I would connect offline just so I can learn a little bit more about how that connects into our work. And then finally, we reviewed the BAF risks as they relate to data and digital. There were two that we looked at. One was the risk relating to data quality. The conversation we had about that was that we were a little bit concerned that the risk is quite narrowly focused on the completion of the V1 or the Verita C1 review. And we queried whether we needed to broaden the risk scope. So Mark E has agreed to take that away, work with the exec. We also considered that perhaps some of the corporate risks may also address some of our concerns around the scope of that, because there may be corporate risks that are more appropriate for some of the data quality points that are being reviewed and addressed. And then, of course, we noted that, as Rommel mentioned earlier, that the internal auditors will be conducting further data quality reviews. So that may well inform the scope of the data quality BAF risk. And then finally, the other risk we looked at was the risk around the CAD implementation. Whilst the CAD implementation has long since concluded, there were two action items still outstanding. One was with respect to an after-action review, so we can ensure that the lessons from that implementation are taken forward. And the second was with respect to changes that occurred after the CAD went live. And then I believe some of those changes were further backed out of the system. So our question is around data integrity as a consequence of those changes. And so we were informed that that work is ongoing and should be concluded by the end of August. I have to say I have not had any visibility of that work to date. So I am a little bit concerned that we just need to make sure it is on the right track. And when we receive it in September, that it is of the standard that we expect, because it is also one of the recommendations. It's recommendation 10 from the Verita C1 review. So it all sort of links together. So it'll either turn up as part of that assurance report we get on the Verita review, or we may need to receive a separate report if there's further work outstanding. So that concludes my update. And perhaps I could just ask for board approval of the terms of reference.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed, Sheila. So just on that last point, board approval for the terms of reference, please. Yeah, all agreed. Yeah, we approve that. Thanks, Sheila. Thanks for leading this work. This is really vital, and it's cropped up in so many ways. And I think it's really important that we have a committee focus that is just on these issues. It touches on so much that's going on at the moment. John, did you want to come in at all?
No, I think Sheila's given a comprehensive update. We're at the start of this journey really, but we are meeting again as a data quality group early September, which will be before the next board subcommittee. So I think we'll be in the flow then.
Good, thanks very much indeed. So we'll look forward to the further updates on that. Anything from any other colleagues on data and digital? If not, thanks again. I think this is really, really important. Well, all of our work's important, but I'm really pleased that you're leading on this. It's so important at the moment. Right, move on then to quality, please. Jacqueline, please.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll take the quality report as read and just draw out a few particular points. So the report relates to May data. Of course, the IPR goes up to June, so you may notice that some of the charts are a little bit different for that reason. So from a no harm incident point of view, that did increase during Q3, but that has come back down to normal variation in Q4. We're still seeing medical equipment as one of our top 3 categories, and Rakesh earlier talked about the Fix the Basics programme. And there are some work streams within that programme to improve access to medical equipment, which we've already heard about today. We have seen an increase in incidents reported in IUEC. That's both for no harm and low harm incidents. So we are seeing special cause variation on the SPC charts. However, we have done quite a lot of work in that part of the organisation to increase a focus on incident reporting. We did see a pattern where when the service became busier, we noticed some changes in the ratios of incident reporting versus calls and patient care episodes. So our feeling is that is as a result of work to increase the focus on reporting rather than any new problems coming through. What we are seeing are similar top 3 incident categories around communication, care and consent, call handling and clinical assessment advice. And we've had quite a push on making sure that we report incidents particularly related to language line there. Looking at our IPC indicators, they're generally looking quite positive at the moment. Overdue incidents, we did touch on that a little bit earlier. We plateaued a little bit with our work on overdue incidents, but that's starting to come down again now. And whilst the report shows 794 in May, as John mentioned earlier, we're down to just over 700 at the moment. We're still doing significant amounts of work to reduce that down, but also using QI methodology to make sure that we sort of keep, once we've got them down, we keep them low and we don't find ourselves popping back up again. Statman training at trust level remains above the 85% target. There is some variation in different parts of the service and some different components. There are some notes on there related to policies and patient experience on the cover sheet. Mark's already covered those things, so I won't duplicate. Happy to take questions.
Thank you very much indeed, Jacqueline. Any questions, please? Karen.
Thanks, Jackie. So just a comment, really. We looked at all this data in quite a lot of detail at QAC, and I guess wanted to just read across the signals from demand, from our performance in terms of time targets, and from the patient harm, no harm and incident levels, and which really just show a service that is operating just at its limit. And the minute that you get a spike in demand, which is either a very short spike like the heat wave, or longer periods of demand like we've seen before, everything just goes out of whack. And we're operating very much on that compliance curve where there is no give in the system. So although things are better, so much of it is linked to a reduced demand at the moment, and we're very fragile, I think.
That is a very good point.
Yeah.
Thank you. John, did you want to come in on this item at all?
No.
Okay, well done. Thanks very much. Are there no further questions? Is it back to you, John, on patient safety investigation?
That's for Jackie as well.
Okay, thank you.
Still me, I'm afraid. So following our conversations at Quality Assurance Committee, I took an action just to bring a short report here to talk about some of the improvements that we're making in the patient safety space. So as colleagues will be aware, we've had our first internal audit of PSURF, the new system which we've had for a couple of years, but the rest of the NHS is moving over to. At the moment, that was a very, very helpful report. It was largely positive. I think they did give us 3 medium level recommendations, all of which have been completed and we're monitoring now. I'm happy to say the team are fully established now, so we've got some increased capacity, and that's really helping us to get on top of things like timeliness of investigations. in that space, we've done a lot of work to improve the size and the access to our pool of lead investigators. So the individuals across the organisation, not just in the patient safety team, that actually undertake the investigation of patient safety incidents. So we've provided quite a lot of training over the last few months, both in terms of refresher training, training up new lead investigators, and also keep giving people updates so that they're happy to use some of the new learning response techniques that that we're using as part of our implementation of PSERF. We've also undertaken a piece of work to try and streamline the processes and take out any identified areas of delays or waste. So the team undertook an after action review a few months ago, and since that after action review, we've seen a consistent improvement in the number of cases that are waiting to go through the process of the patient safety investigation panel for a decision to then formally launch or not an enhanced investigation. Part of that is down to improved staffing numbers, both within the patient safety team and within the quality governance and improvement management team. But also we've been looking at making sure that the processes that happen in different sectors are consistent, making some improvements to get the accuracy of the harm level right as early in the incident report as possible. We've streamlined the LFD process, particularly around kind of the relationship between the first and second stages of the review process with Fenella's team. We've made a few just small technical changes to the trust management system to make the process easier for users as well. We've spoken before about the focus that we've had on duty of candour, and in part because of the increase in lead investigators, but also some work we've done to make sure that those lead investigators have access to the time to complete the work associated with investigation. And we've also worked with them on the confidence of making what are really, really quite difficult phone calls, you know, of course, not just for the lead investigator, but for the family member or the patient on the receiving end of the telephone call, and that's compliance in duty of candour is increased significantly. Of course, you want to get that up to 100% or as close as possible, so more work still to be done. We've been able to resume our quality improvement training, so we've run 3 one-day fundamentals courses since June. We've got another 5 dates in the diary over the next 3 months, and then that will allow us to provide capacity for another 80 members of staff to access that training. And we've also got our longer 5-day QSA Practitioner programme running again from September. We've also been doing a reasonable amount of work to try and use more effectively the new learning responses that come with PSERF. So since the 1st of April, we've commissioned 27 after action reviews. After action reviews are a much more conversational way of understanding what happened within an incident, and we can do them much more quickly than we can complete a sort of an older style case review or a longer patient safety investigation report. The important thing with these techniques is we pick the right one for the incident. They're all kind of an equal footing. There's no kind of hierarchy there, but it's about sort of selecting the right one. In one case, for example, this was an industrial action related case. We were able to undertake the after action review and implement the learning in less than 2 weeks, which is a much quicker timescale than other techniques, and something which I hope to be seeing more frequently. And actually the feedback from staff I think is really, really important in this. I won't read out all of the quotes because I know you can see them on Convene, but I think what stands out to me is the ability that staff are expressing, that the opportunity to talk about a case that's not gone well in a much safer way, and actually people saying I was able to talk about what went wrong in some detail and not feel blamed. So I think it's a really, really important thing as part of our development of a just culture as well. So that's all I wanted to highlight, and happy to take questions.
Thanks, Jackie. There's a lot there. Well done. Thank you. Any questions for Jackie on that, please? Rommel.
Thank you, Chair. Not a question, just wanted to thank Jackie publicly for, I guess, the work we were doing here as an early adopter, you know, has paid dividends because she was able to share that with colleagues at the Homerton who have now benefited, and so it's kind of accelerated the process there. So thank you for that.
Thanks. I'll pass that on to the team.
Well done. Thank you. Mark, please.
Much the same. Just wanted to thank Jackie for the work she's done. It's impressive.
Okay, thank you. Well done. Mark, to Karen, please. Was it Karen?
No, I was just going to say that I thought at Quack we asked Jackie to bring a paper here on this because we thought it was important to show the breadth of stuff that was actually going on to assure patient safety, and a lot of it seemed quite hidden underneath the new control charts and things. So I think it's important to highlight it.
Well done. Thanks, Karen. Jackie, yeah, well done. Thanks ever so much. Obviously, a huge amount of work gone into there. Very grateful to you and yours for everything that you're doing on this front. Thank you. Right, we'll move on now to board assurance. Mark, please.
Yes, so you have the latest version of the draft BAF, and I would stress it is still a draft. An outline was agreed at the development session of the board on the 27th of June. And since then, we've been working to flesh it out. Because of scheduling, only 2 assurance committees have had the chance to review it. And you've heard from Sheila and from Anne some of the comments that they made on the BAF. This version is not updated with their changes. And of course, the other committees have now have not to date had a chance to look at it. So that would be the next stage. We were asked to list the risks that have become outdated or replaced and therefore don't feature on the current BAF in the same way they did on the last BAF. So they're listed here. I think this version of the BAF is largely here to note and for anyone to make any comments on. I'm not asking the board to approve it at this stage because I think it would be right for it to go through all the board assurance committees before it's brought back to the board for agreement.
When will that be ready, Mark, do you think?
So we'll have gone through the cycle by the time of the next board meeting.
Right, okay.
So we'll come back to the next board as having gone through the assurance committees.
Right, thank you. Any comments, colleagues, on that? If not, then we'll look forward to having a more thorough look at next time round once all these are updated. Okay, all right, then we'll move on to the next item, which is policy on policies, I think, Mark.
Yes, so I mentioned earlier on that we've had a challenge in keeping our policies up to date. And so we've done a bit of research. We've discovered one of the reasons for that is that our policy on policies is a bit different from other organisations. So we've done a search on a number of other NHS organisations, and we've introduced some things which we think bring it more in line to other practice. So the first thing is we want to give people the ability to agree policies for up to 3 years, rather than the current limit of 1 year, which effectively means we have to review 98 policies a year, which really is quite a lot. So that would make quite a change. Up until now, we've not had a process for reclassifying policies into guidelines or some lesser version of documents. And I think in the long list we've got of policies, I think some of them aren't really policies and some of them need to be downgraded into guidelines. And the third point is that we want to encourage a bit more delegation. So it's suggested only this policy is reserved to the board. Some of the other policies which historically have gone to the board, we are suggesting go to assurance committees. And there are some that we are suggesting are signed off by ExCo. In terms of some safeguards on that, the new policy places a responsibility on directors to keep board committees updated on policy changes in their area. And in my corporate affairs report, every time I will update the board on any changes to policies. So if anyone's got a concern about a particular policy, it can be scrutinised. So hopefully that explains why we're making these changes, and I think the board feel they can agree them.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. This looks very timely to reduce the demand for constant reapproval. I suppose it's just as you rightly say, how do we make sure that there is some oversight of these matters, and if it's through the committees, then that's appropriate. I suppose it's also making sure that we don't have old policies lying around there, because certainly my experience in other places, you can sometimes find multiple policies on the same thing, which are all at variance with each other, which doesn't help very much, nor does it help compliance. But any questions for Mark on that, please? Sheila, please.
I just had one, really, Chair. It's really about Section 12 and the monitoring. I mean, I suppose I'm still unclear as to, you know, how we can gain assurance that of the effectiveness of the policies, particularly those that are critical policies, you know, because there's a risk that if there isn't some sort of board report, we're not aware of whether policies are effective. So I just have a slight concern, and I'm not quite sure how we mitigate that. I mean, because we certainly don't want to have internal audit review every effectiveness of every policy. So I don't know, Mark, if you have any thoughts on that.
Well, two thoughts. One is that's actually Section 12 is a section which hasn't changed. So that's the existing wording. I guess in terms of monitoring the effectiveness of policy, it very much depends on the nature of the policy itself, because they've got such an enormous scope. A lot of our policies are to do with HR matters, and you would expect that to be part of the scrutiny that people and culture make of the effectiveness of our HR arrangements. Some of them are things like, fleet and service maintenance. So again, there are metrics around vehicle readiness and vehicle availability. I suppose the difficulty is there isn't one place where it's all gathered together, where you can say, well, this is a collection of metrics which tell us how the policies are working. It's more diffuse than that.
Thanks, Mark. Anne, please.
The only one that sort of is slightly, I've got a question about, is freedom to speak up. And I don't know what Amit feels about this. So, it is the policy. I get that, but it feels that freedom to speak up could be about the executive, but we're saying to the executive, approve the policy. So it might be okay for the policy, but as long as the system feels. But that's the one I have a question about, really.
Yeah, I think it's a good point, and I had a bit of a question about that one as well, whether it was better for that to remain at people and culture sort of assurance committee level, because part of the freedom to speak up is around routes should a concern come to mind about the chief exec or the executive. So I think I couldn't find a copy of the policy myself though to look at it to see what's in the current one. But I think if it talks about those sorts of matters, then I think it's probably wise to keep it.
From memory, I think that the national guidance says the board will approve a freedom to speak up policy from memory, but it might have moved on, Mark, so just don't quote me on that. But I mean, if it did it through PCC, that's but I think it probably needs committee oversight, that one.
In terms of tuning this, I don't have any problem at all with people and culture being responsible for that policy. You obviously you make yourself the distinction between the policy and the way it's operated, but I suppose we do, we do need to guard against a unscrupulous executive that approves a policy which isn't stringent enough.
Okay. Anything else on that at all? So are we being asked to approve this policy, Mark?
With the amendment that Anne suggests.
Yeah. So with the amendment that's been suggested, do we approve the policy? Yes, we do. Thanks very much. I think that takes us to AOB. I just want to mention Barry Thurston is not with us today. I think he's still at work, but he's leaving us quite soon. And thank him for his work that he's done on behalf of the trust. And I think we're going to miss him. He's an incredible depth of knowledge. across not only LAS but across the whole ambulance service, and he's been a huge asset to us. So I'd like to record on behalf of our colleagues our best wishes for him and our thanks for what he's done. Thank you. Is there any other business from any other colleagues at all? Meg, I'm not aware of any questions that have been submitted. Are there any?
You're right, no questions.
Right. If there's nothing else from colleagues, then I thank you very much indeed and look forward to seeing you at future subcommittee and board meetings. Thanks very much indeed, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks all.
Thank you. Well, that was well in time. Do we know when Gary's actually leaving? 'Cause I'm worried that he's going to leave and going to get into trouble with the digital meeting.
It's good to be able to hear you still.